Okay, let's call to order, beginning with a pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning. And sure enough, I'm smelling the smoke that they predicted. It's a little. Moving on quickly to the chairman's report. We had since the last meeting, we had the Earth Day Healthy Kids event on April 26th. It was very nicely done, and Jeff had presented a wall of pictures showing the history of the Southport Harbor, and it was quite educational to even myself, looking at the pictures I've never seen, and people were coming in quite often in order to see it. And we shared.
Did you want to approve the minutes?
Yes, thank you. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes.
And does anybody, would anybody like to move to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I move the minutes be approved.
Seconded?
I'm second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? What do we make sure we have a quorum? I think we do, actually, in the room.
1, 2, 3, 4.
5. So we.
And who's on the line?
And who's on the line? Who are commissioners?
Dave Henry.
And Bill Perugini.
All right. Very good. So again, we had a very fun time, educational for the kids and all of the adults and parents who were going through for Earth Day, Healthy Kids Day at the YMCA a couple of weeks ago. And then this past Saturday, on the 17th, we had the commissioning at Pequot Yacht Club, and Don and his wife were on site, as well as the harbor master, the clerk, and it was very well done. I will note that there was the Commodore in his speech made a special comment about the connection of the Pequot Yacht Club and the activities that it does with the town and the community and high schools and all of that. Moving on now to Harbor Master report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vessels are arriving in the harbor. We've been inspecting their locations and the lines as they connect to make sure all is in order. There's 2 speed buoys. The 5-mile-an-hour buoys are in place. I'm having them moved. They're out of position. They're too close and too far in, so we're going to get them back to where they were last year. They were just placed a little off by the club to make it clear. Where they are now makes the harbor too narrow coming in as you come around the end of the jetty. Mr. Devlin's boat, as you know, is the furthest one to the southwest. It's the Blue Hinckley that sits kind of by itself past the lower wharf. There's a problem. One of his anchors was missing, and I've talked to the club a few times as recent as this morning. We think what happened is when they were doing the dredging, the boat may have strayed out of the channel a little bit, diverted, and picked up one of the lines and the cables. They found one of the 2. They found the bow one. They couldn't find the stern one, which is right on the edge of the Federal Channel. They tried for about an hour and a half of grappling for it and can't find it. So it's either somewhere else, dragged somewhere else, or it got buried in the mud. Good news is they had an extra one, so they've taken one out of reserve and are putting it out there and are using it successfully for his boat right now. So we may have to replace it. And we're going to, once everything gets settled, we'll probably have buy a backup one so we have one extra ready to go. Because that's actually one of the clubs they're using right now. They have the one extra mooring, unless we find it, which I don't know that's going to happen. So it happens. Been getting a lot of questions from people that have bought boats and now would like to come into our harbor, as well as someone who is buying a house and was questioning the dock in the harbor and the use of it. We got one complaint about speeding jet skis in Pine Creek, so we'll have to keep an eye on them. They're going to try to get a picture of the jet skis when they come by if no one's around, so I can at least run registrations, find it that way. Again, we went to the commissioning at the Yacht Club. It was a very nice event Saturday. Had a nice conversation with the Commodore about the relationship with your commission and the harbor masters and the Yacht Club. Blessing of the Fleet. We had a meeting this morning. Again, it's June 14th. Everything is in order. The pancake breakfast is starting a half hour later, 9 o'clock. The parade will start at 11, and the blessing will be at 12 noon. High tide is around that same time. If you're interested, that same morning is the Shellfish Clinic at Sasco Beach. John and I are going to the DEEP Harbor Master Training Annual Seminar tomorrow on their headquarters on Old Lyme for the day. June 12th is the safety drill that we do every year with the Yacht Club in the harbor. And the Fire Department Deputy Chief met with me this morning. He's looking for a new location to put the fireboat. So we chatted briefly about that. I talked to Jeff about that. It's not like we have a lot of room to put them anywhere else. And we can't just add docks where they'd like to add them because of water depth. And I walked him through the yacht yard and showed him the depths that we're facing at mid-tide. So it's a moving target. We'll talk more with him about that as we go forward. And that is my report before I asphyxiate myself.
It's pretty thick, this smoke. Make sure you get that from the minutes. Bad smoke in the room.
Those on the phone, they turned some unit on the roof and it's filling the room with smoke. But they tell us not to worry.
Oh, it's a smoke detector.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Harbor Master. Now we move on to old business, and the first item is the wage bill 6914. Jeff, do you have any further report on this?
Only that we've heard from the legislators who were involved with it, including the legislator from Greenwich who introduced the original bill, that they will not pass the substitute bill this year. And I probably talk about it in Stanford at 6:32. But that was an email from Representative Arzano, who said that they would not pass that bill because they feel now that it's problematic, and they will not pass it with the understanding that DEEP will work with the Harbor Management Commissions to come up with an agreeable bill for the next legislative session. So
that's in our favor, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
So
if everything goes as the legislator has told us, but he, in two email conversations and also phone conversations with people in Stanford and Greenwich, he said that the substitute bill will not be passed.
So to be clear, in our favor means that the Harbor Management Commission has the ability to comment on projects put before DEEP, and the DEEP should read them and respond to it.
That's still the issue, but the substitute bill would have even further diminished. Everybody feels that ability of the Harbor Commission because the substitute bill only called for DEEP to consider the recommendations of the Harbor Management Commission. So the understanding is that DEEP will work with us between now, again, who knows if they hold their agreement, between now and the next legislative session, and we'll come up with a bill that reflects what everybody thinks is the right way to proceed with this.
All right. Any questions?
And in the meantime, there's a number of towns like we are here pursuing updating of the harbor management plans. And the understanding that the towns have is that they will put into the plan, what DEEP has approved in other plans. That DEEP must listen to a recommendation of the Harbor Commission, and if they do something different, they have to explain why. But that's where we are, and there's a lot of effort. In fact, the East Line Commission is meeting tonight to discuss the same thing, and so is the Stanford. But everybody is under the understanding, based on what we've been told, that the bill will not be, the DEEP supports will not be passed this year. So let's hope that is the case.
So the next legislative session where a compromise bill might come up will be in 2026?
Yes.
Good. So we stand by, and it's in our favor until then. So
a lot of work is to keep our place, to keep the same place we started at.
Any further questions? Let's move on then to the Lower Wharf rebuild update.
That's me too. Well, I don't know that we've received as you know, the town engineer, Mr. Hurley, was ill. He had an emergency appendectomy. But fortunately he's recovering, and he was back at work last week part-time. So he and I are to work, and he's looking for it now to prepare the submittal town plan and zoning for the coastal site plan review to work on the wall at the lower wharf. And I just talked to Emily as she was leaving. So what we've been asked to do is to include in our lower wharf plans the same environmental protection or siltation protection as engineering did for their Perry Green project. So Bill was to help us do that, but he was obviously delayed for a little bit doing it. But so he and I are going to work on that now. But that's the last approval we need, assuming we get the deep approval issued in a short period of time. So Bill we'll work on that next week. I'm assuming if he's healthy, or not healthy, but depending on his time.
Great.
Just one question. I get asked, I'm sure others get asked, when, might they start construction? I know there's so many things that have to be considered and reviewed and approved. At one conversation I had with Bill a while ago said, optimally in the fall of this year. Is that realistic, or will it be later than that?
I have no idea. I mean, they have to put it out to bid, and that has to go through the purchasing department, but that's all something that is handled by DPW and engineering. So I can check
funding too.
The funding is settled. We have a bond. The funding. We got the bond appropriation from the state. We have to do our accounting and submit our bills, but the money is there.
Well, again, Bill, the most important thing is that he's recovered from what he had to face, and then
I only raise the point because I get asked.
I forget if I knew, are we planning on doing the bulkhead and the pier at the same time?
Well, that's again up to engineering how they wish to proceed with that. I wouldn't know how to answer that question. Assuming you have to do the bulkhead first, but I don't know.
That would make sense. But the funding's for both.
And whether it would be the same contractor doing both, I don't know.
Okay.
But that would all be handled by engineering and purchasing. But we have to get that coastal site plan review, which Emily said would be an administrative review. Doesn't require a public hearing or a TP&Z hearing.
I think it was 1.6 million. I think, my memory is not correct. It was approved by R3 for this.
Great. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Move on to the mooring committee. Mr. Warren?
No report.
No report, thank you. Love that. Harbor Master boat purchase update and Harbor Master duties update. Mr. Harris, I think you've got the...
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick. I do have some stuff to report, though. I had Betty attach it to the agenda, the revision of the Harbor Master duties to look at with a couple changes from last meeting. Don has also asked me to add the last bullet point there, communicate with, just add the word with and direct the duties of the Deputy Harbor Master rather than communicate direct. Which sounds right to me.
Can you please repeat that?
Sure. The one I sent around the draft.
Yep, I have.
We're going to add the word with after communicate on the very last bullet point.
Thank you.
And then you would add a bullet point.
Yeah, then we would add a bullet point to the last sentence.
Okay.
That my formatting
Got it. Thank you.
Want to do for some reason.
So do we want to actually vote on that, or do we want to? It's something that will go on, and then change from time to time as things occur. The requirement.
I had an additional comment if we go into the discussion. I need to apologize because I was not present at the last meeting, and so I read before this meeting but didn't submit anything in advance. The one comment that I have is it seems to me that there's an opportunity, unless it was discussed and not in there, to add a little more into it about ensuring the safety of harbor users. And so I have some suggested language. I read it a few times and was just looking specifically for that. I think would be, there is a key portion. So my suggestion, two suggestions if I can, just do it on the fly. One is in the opening paragraph, the second sentence, one of the appointments are for 3 years and continue until successors appointed and qualified. Harbor masters are responsible for, and I would suggest adding the language, ensuring the safety of all harbor users, comma, and then it would continue the general care and supervision.
One thing I would say is this is from the actual state statute, so this is it's basically quoting the state statute, yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
I didn't bring this, but yes, and there's another section of the statute that talks about the harbor master's responsibility for safe and efficient operation of the harbor. And I think that's another, you might want to...
I saw that. So in other words, this is a state document, so then in which case we can't vote on it.
Well, yes and
I think
no.
that's a hybrid.
I think the first part of it is taken from that state language. The second part, the bullet points, are our own.
Yes, and I guess to Doug's point, we can change our language if we want to.
Well, and I also then had a suggestion of adding a bullet point which may serve the purpose, which is assist with ensuring public safety, including patrolling navigable waterways and response to incidents involving watercraft. And I just found that language in other harbor master responsibilities. But
I think it's a good
the point I
idea.
wanted to put into discussion is I felt like when I read it, the primary responsibility of the harbor master is ensuring the safety of harbor users and the navigable waterways, and that this could be strengthened in that.
I think that's a good idea. And you get that by putting in a bullet point rather than adding it in the first paragraph.
I think so.
And that's not in conflict with the other first responders in any way. This word to assist.
Assist ensuring public safety.
I actually disagree with the last sentence. I actually don't think that should be included with this job description, and that represents an expansion of the harbor master's duties relative to what's been done for the past 40 years. I just don't think it's needed or necessary to have it in this job description. At the last meeting, I asked what's happened now that requires an expansion of the harbor master's duty in that direction. The only answer I got was there are more paddle boarders and kayakers than there used to be. I think that the idea that paddle boarders and kayakers dictate an on-water presence of the harbor master is just nonsense. That makes no sense to me. The other comment I had is this whole document is really separate from the state document. The harbor master is a state employee, and our agreement, which is outlined here, is if you look at the harbor management plan, it dictates what our relationship with the harbor master is, and that is to implement the harbor management plan. So if there are things in this that are not in a harbor management plan, that's not really necessary. And especially if it's something that's dictated by the state requirement, that doesn't have to be our requirement as well. So, for example, the item about enforcing ordinances and regulations, we don't really have to include it. That's his requirement with the state. That's really not us. Our relationship with the harbor master is for him to implement the harbor management plan. So if you look at the harbor management plan, it says nothing about enforcing regulations and ordinances. So I think we're opening up a real can of worms by having that in our job description, because that's a big requirement, and you have to really think about what you mean by that. There's hundreds of regulations that could fall under this category. What exactly do you want the harbor master to be doing? And the vast majority of those, there's no, in a practical sense, it just is not realistic to ask the harbor master to be involved with any of them. Law enforcement things, DUIs, pulling people over and doing both. I mean, this has nothing to do with what we want our harbor master doing. So having a broad requirement like that of enforcing regulations that enforce it, that doesn't have to be in there. That is part of his agreement with the state, and so that should suffice. He's going to have to comply with the state requirements. It doesn't mean we have to get involved with enforcing the same thing.
So I'll make a couple comments, if I might. Remember that this came out of the discussion around the boat. We said, well, what has changed in the harbor master's duties to justify a boat? And then we dug into this. And in so doing, we're not usurping the state's description of duties for the harbor master. Rather, we're defining it for the particularities of our harbor. And we recognize as a result of this, in the scope of this activity, that the nature of the harbor has evolved, and such it isn't just stand-up boards and kayaks. It's lots more open console, Boston whalers and Makos and water ski, not water ski doos coming in and out, and there's a lot more activity with that justifies more presence on the water, particularly since there isn't a constant presence with a police boat resident in that harbor, rather one that comes in from time to time. Having somebody who's there more regularly, particularly at certain events, seemed justified. I think that's where we came down at the last meeting, which means that this document itself, maybe some language should be put in here to suggest that this is based upon the town of Fairfield's South Fork Harbor requirements that may be in addition to the town of the state requirements.
I'd like to know what the evidence for what you just said is.
You're right, it's anecdotal. I mean, it's observation.
I mean, if this was the police commission and you were trying to decide whether to put a stop sign or had too many people speeding, you put out a strip counting cars, you would have somebody recording how fast they go. This is just anecdotal. And honestly, I'm on that harbor a couple of times. I don't see a lot of what you're talking about. Any given day I'm out there, I look up and down the harbor, I don't see any paddleboards or kayak patrol. Sometimes I'll see a couple of them. I don't see this big surge. I definitely don't see problems that they're creating that require restriction. And Bill, please inform me, what are the problems of paddleboarders and tankers and, you can say open console boats. There's a limited number of moorings and slips in this harbor. Most of the activity in this harbor is related to boats. The activity of boats is a function of how many boats are in the harbor. That has been for 40 years. The same number of harbor.
Jeff, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I would say you're right. It is anecdotal observation. I would say that during an average weekday, you don't see that kind of activity. On a weekend or a holiday weekend, perhaps this upcoming weekend, we could probably see quite a lot of more boats that are not resident there, coming from all over that want to drop an anchor at the country club beach, right there, or to go and grab a mooring that happens to be free and hang and have lunch there. You see a lot more activity, but point well taken. It isn't measured. It is observational and anecdotal in nature. However, we have decided that we were going to move forward with a vote, and this is sort of.
I didn't know that. Was that voted on?
It was, yeah. We not voted in the last meeting.
Not to approve the
Not
purpose of a vote.
to look for the vote that we will approve.
That's different from making a decision.
Yes, it is.
Okay. This document is very important in that the language is going to support going vote and not going to vote, especially that last sentence. And
So what are you proposing, that we do not create this document? Because
I think that last sentence should just be deleted. I don't think it's necessary or indicated. And I also think of the section about enforcing regulations. Unless you have a disqualifier in there about what regulations you're talking about is enforced. That's kind of a broad dictate. And once you put it in job what exactly are you requiring?
our harbor master does go for training. Both John and Brian go to training for just that purpose, to determine what sort of ordinances are. Perhaps you might talk to that.
Yeah, the state statutes outline what enforcement powers harbor masters and deputy harbor masters have, for speed, for unsafe operation of vessels, for life effect, for discharging, for capacity issues, for state boating certificate issues. And what we can't do, there's certain things we can't. Manslaughter with a vessel, arrest for. We have to have a police officer come and do that. But it does talk about what criminal laws, if you will, what do have the power to enforce. And a lot of it with kayaks, I can add, I think a lot of what I spend time doing is, not just in the harbor, but in your harbor management area, off of Stasco Hill Beach, is kayaks and stand-up paddle boards, is talking to the people, number one, to keep the passageway clear. They have a habit often of blocking vessels, and I have to remind them where they have to stay, but of life jackets, which is probably the biggest issue I face, not having them on the vessels, yet alone not wearing them this time of year when they're supposed to until it gets warmer. And in the fall, they have to wear them, but not even having them on the boat. And a lot of it, the education is pulling up, stop, chatting with these people. Where you going? It's rough. You should be heading out. More important, what the heck's your life jacket? And that's what we see a lot of, unfortunately, with kayaks and paddleboard SUVs. So,
just make one comment here. In the harbor management plan, in our current chapter 6, we have several pages listing, we call it recommendations for responsibility of the harbor master in the mooring committee. So and now we're updating the plan, and so whatever new responsibilities you may come up with, those may require an amendment of the existing responsibilities that are now in chapter 6, and we're proposing to be in the new organization, chapter 8. So regarding enforcement, there is a paragraph, existing paragraph in the plan. The harbor master should enforce boating laws and regulations in Southport Harbor to the extent practicable. The harbor master is empowered by state law to enforce the boating rules and regulations of the state of Connecticut. The harbor master also should be authorized by the town's harbor management ordinance to enforce all applicable provisions of that ordinance. The harbor master should not engage in arrests or other enforcement activities that may represent a potential for personal injury. The harbor master should call upon the Marine Unit of the Fairfield Police Department or other law enforcement authority for assistance in all situations involving potential arrest or confrontation. So that's the statement in the harbor management plan now.
So I think it actually does cover it,
Right.
as that shows. And
But there's language in there that says as practical.
As
That
practical.
should be added in here.
so perhaps there's what I want to avoid is throwing all the cards up in the air and starting from scratch, gathering everything together. So I want to make sure that we make progress here. We had made some progress. Now you're correct, and Jeff points out that this document, the duties document, should mirror the harbor management plan, and I think it's close to it, but maybe there's some other steps that could be done to do that. I would say that last sentence is covered in that sentence that he just mentioned. But let's do this for now, because I'm afraid we're going to get wound up in build, rebuild. Let's take another shot at this, George, if you wouldn't mind. One that matches the language in the harbor management plan to this, such that it is connected. And then, but what we are doing here is, as per the March 18th meeting, not the last meeting, but the one before it, on a motion by Don, and seconded by George, to authorize Harbor Master Boat Request Review Committee to proceed to specify the type of boat the Harbor Master might use in future, and all related costs and insurance and maintenance costs as to be determined, and determine if a person who is not a town employee can operate that town boat. That's what was the subcommittee's mandate, and they're following through with that. When part of that added on to it was to further refine the duties document. So let's take another step towards the duties document based upon your comments and Jeff's. Okay, let's do that. You can say, Doug.
So let's say proceeding to specify the boat, though, doesn't mean the boat is approved.
No.
Specify the parameters of the boat.
We've not approved any financing at all.
It's yet another step further. We're moving in a direction. We're not moving backwards. But so let's take the duty, set that here for a moment, and why don't we talk about the boat?
Okay. Can I
Sorry,
just clarify?
Don, you want to?
Just a point of clarification. it should be obvious, we added the provide, the last bullet, to reflect the changing conditions in the harbor and the changing role of the harbor master to improve safety in the harbor. That was a change that was kind of consonant with the other discussion, which I don't know that you agreed with that, but that was the discussion and the vote on that. And of course, our harbor management plan is being revised as we speak. So theoretically, this could revise the plan as well. And I mean, that bullet could be inserted in a revised plan theoretically if the committee wanted to do that.
But I think if I may, the point that Jeff is trying to make is that the harbor master is an appointed state official. They're also an ex officio member of this commission, and they're supporting this commission. But we can only speak to the harbor master's duties as it relates to the Fairfield Harbor Management Commission and the harbor management plan. Any other responsibilities that the harbor master may have are part of their responsibilities as a state official, not an overreach by the agency. So any enforcement obligations or things like that, it's not that the harbor master doesn't have that. It's just not the Harbor Management Commission's jurisdiction to talk about enforcement because that's a local law enforcement issue. So I think one way to address it in the document and then also to make sure that it's cascaded properly with the plan is it says the harbor master is appointed by the governor. We should say they're a state official and they also support the Harbor Management Commission and the Harbor Management Plan in these areas. And the areas that we talk about should only be specific to the HMC. The other aspects are just part of their state responsibilities and somebody else's, right?
Right.
Because we don't have the authority to suggest that you enforce the law.
And you can't tell us what not to do. You can't say, Brian, don't pay attention to docks, or don't pay attention to fuel spills, or speeding boaters, or wakes, or life jackets. We have to do something about that.
And so the list of bullets is mostly in very much keeping with the plan, issuing mooring permits, coordinating planning of navigable, right? But the point that Jeff is making is the enforcement of laws, not an HMC thing, is part of your responsibilities as a state employee.
Well, this is stated in the plan, though, that's Jeff just read. Of course, the ordinances that.
And so my point is, as there should be, as it represents as a state official.
And she'll have those powers.
The HMC doesn't have the authority to ask them to enforce laws.
You can note that they
State does.
Which Jeff said, yeah. You can note that we have the powers as set forth in the general statutes. That's Jeff.
So I think that's exactly Jeff's point, is not to strip those responsibilities, but to more clarify that it's a state official who's supporting the HMC, and in a capacity supporting the HMC, then there are certain responsibilities. We're not getting into their responsibilities as a state official.
And
Right? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you're trying to say.
one other statement that might be made is, again, from the statutes, the harbor masters or deputy harbor masters shall exercise their duties in a manner consistent with the harbor management plan adopted pursuant to the harbor over which they have jurisdiction. I don't know if that was mentioned, George, in your
So that starts to get a little looping, right? So that the state statutes have one set of dictum, but it's also supposed to follow our harbor management plan, which is another set. So they need to mesh. So we've got it to a point where George will take another shot at it based upon these comments to cement them to connect with our harbor management plan.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yes, except I have a question because someone brought up, I think it was Jeff, the bullet point here, and he didn't see why that was being added. But speaking to what Doug just said, I think that's something that the Harbor Commission is allowed to add. We're not.
I think you were saying the last sentence, not bullet point, right?
Last sentence.
I'm not sure that.
Provided an official on water presence.
I'm not sure that that's part of the harbor management plan. If that's what we're saying, that this is all supposed to be, in accordance with the harbor management plan. That was actually not mentioned in the harbor management plan.
But this is something we're working on now too, include in the harbor management plan.
That's something different. That's something different.
Right, so we need to harmonize the two for sure.
Yeah.
I think, George, if this is helpful, it may be as simple as, in addition to their duties as a state official, the harbor master will support the HMC and the HMP. I'm just using, the harbor management commission and harbor management plan as needed with a list of bullet points.
Yep.
And that's because, for example, harbor masters are in charge of moorings on that, in the state of Connecticut. But I can't just moorings anywhere I want in the harbor because we have a harbor management plan which limits numbers and things like that, and a system for awarding them. I can't say I'm harbor master. Heck with your list. I'm going to, charge whatever I want, and I'm going to put them wherever I want. We have to follow the harbor management plan, and that's where that
Well, let's not rewrite it here right now. Why don't we let George do that in his, and George, you're left with some ambiguity. I can see
Yeah.
the frustration in your mind.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
I appreciate it. Thank
It's
you.
not as bad as the sign.
Not yet.
So,
Getting close.
but there is more to have. You made
Yes.
progress with the
Yes,
vote.
yes. I'll go over this quickly, and this is, I spoke with the police marine representative. Their maintenance is done on their boats through local shops and paid for with their budget. So any maintenance, if and when we had a boat, would likely come out of our line items in our budget. So I would suggest that eventually we ask for a line item budget, and I came up with a round figure of $1,500 and this is just research stuff that I'm going over. I also spoke to Joe Raines at the fire department. They have a maintenance department that does some of the work on their boats, and other larger work for the engine and stuff are done by marinas. Joe suggested a maritime skiff with hydraulic steering. We talked about where the boat would be docked because that had come up with a question from someone, and it would be docked at the yard opposite the fireboat, and the trailer storage and winter storage would be done at the fire training center, One Rat Highway. Don and I met with Adam Tulin, the purchasing director here in Town Hall this past Tuesday, and he has looked but could not find any boats of this type on state contracts that are already established. So this would be something that have to go out to bid. There are two types of bid, RFP versus a standard bid. RFP is a lot more involved, but you have room to adjust. The bid, you take the lowest price, but I've been told that we could specify exactly what we wanted and then be able to, so we wouldn't get a cheap boat. We would get the boat we wanted. I did ask about the insurance costs, and he's spoken to the CFO and COO, and they saw no roadblocks, and they did not think insurance would be a problem, but he wasn't sure whether we were going to pay that or he would pay that, and it would be negligible. We guessed at around $500 a year, but I asked him to look into that. He said if we go to approval, this is just for our information, it would be 6 to 8 weeks once the bid goes.
Okay, so that's what you've accumulated right now. I don't think we're in a position to vote.
Any other? Yeah, no. But any other questions the commission has that I can look into? Well,
I'll just say that, I'm afraid that we're kicking this down the road again and again and again. I'd like to a point when we can take action or no action or whatever, but just get it done. So would it be possible for you to get a draft to people of the duties in advance of the next meeting so that when we go to the next meeting, we're in a position to have a vote?
Mm-hmm.
A question for Brian. In the absence of a new boat, what is your modus operandi in the harbor now?
I'm kidding. I have my personal whaler. I have a
You're going to continue to use that?
1963. That's all I have. I have a 1963 whaler, 13-footer, and I'll just continue to use that as I did last year.
And of course, I think Pequot will offer to take you out there too, right?
If I needed something, I could, if they're not doing anything pressing at the time, yeah.
Because I seem to recall that the CFO was concerned about that.
He was, and I talked to him this week, CFO, Emergency Management Director, and he said he and the first selectman were on board with going forward with the boat, purchasing that boat.
Right.
I mean, when they saw the boat, they were concerned about its size, age, and freeboard, and the fact that we're trying to use that for the harbor ranch.
Not a lot of freeboard.
There's no freeboard. And mine sitting in the back maybe that much.
I might say we talked with Deep about the possibility of getting some state funds through a particular grant program, but that didn't seem feasible because Deep wanted any boat that might be purchased to be used by more than just one town, to be shared with other communities as a regional asset. So we didn't think that particular grant program was feasible to pursue.
Okay, any further discussion around the boat, Harbor Master duties or anything? We've got our marching orders for the next meeting. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the, sorry?
Well, as you said, a lot of good work.
Yeah, thank you, George. Sorry to throw it back at you like that, but I think this is good points being raised. Yeah. POCD, Jeff, do you have a comment on that?
No, and we still haven't been informed that a draft for adoption is prepared yet by TP&Z, and that once it is, there'll be a 65-day notice period, as we've been informed by members of the TPC, for the selectmen to comment, and then our comment period would be 35 days within that. So it's still not, there's still nothing for us to respond to.
Okay. Any other questions? Next is the refund of the ship's grant funds to the Port of Authority, and we had some dialogue on this, and excuse me for if I have misunderstood it, but just to summarize it down to the narrow here, it's we've calculated what it is that we thought we should be refunding, and that doesn't match what the Connecticut State or the Port Authority is expecting to receive by a margin of what?
$7,000.
So that is $7,000. So that $7,000 is what we have to go back to them and find out what we can do to come to an agreement. Or
well, it's quite interesting because all along we were in effect making a proposal or an argument to the Port Authority about what we felt should be returned to the Harbor Commission, and that was based on. But the Port Authority and the project manager is no longer at the Port Authority several years ago. We initially requested or thought we could repurpose that $266,000 grant to work on the Lower Wharf. That seemed to be something that we could pursue. However, then when the Port Authority looked at it in more detail, since our $266,000 was allocated by the Bond Commission for the specific purpose of the dredging, we couldn't repurpose it. So we had to return the amount minus what we felt was, again, our proposal for the amount of money that we've already, that we had expended. So we did, and Betty did a tremendous amount of work to compile all of the ordinances, the invoices, the purchase orders, and the proof of town payment for our engineering expenses, which were provided by RACE. And there were purchase orders specifically for RACE to do this work. I also assisted throughout, but that was not in accordance with any specific contract I had, that could be referred to. The engineering department and the purchasing department, they also did a tabulation of their in-kind services, the hours that they spent. The Port Authority would not determine that wasn't something that they would consider.
so how do we get this resolved? I mean, there's this, our position, well,
I think their position is it was always up to them. So we submitted all of the RACE invoices, and it was approximately $19,000 that we spent. And that included efforts to try to, change the original permit, that was for Central Long Island Sound. So we documented $19,000 of engineering costs. The Port Authority, though, and again, it's up to their final decision. they decided finally that they looked at our original proposal. And in our original grant proposal, we asked for $12,000 in engineering expenses and the rest was construction expenses. So the Port Authority's final decision was that we documented that we spent at least $12,000. So that's what they said we could retain. And so what they've written to the first selectman is 266,000 minus 12, and that's whatever that amount is what they're saying the town needs to return. So
the difference is $7,000,
yes.
$7,700, and that's so. Where it stands is a letter from Fiona Haynes from the Connecticut Port of Authority has written a letter stating just that to the first selectman, and the first selectman now has to decide whether they're going to give that to them and eat the $7,000, or do we argue that? I mean,
well, the other consideration is that the Port Authority is expected to have another grant round this year, that we would perhaps there's something that we could apply for. So my thought was that all along we were making a proposal to the Port Authority about the amount of money that we thought that we should be able to retain. The Port Authority made a different decision based on, it's a much simpler one. You asked in the grant for 12,000 engineering costs. We know you spent at least 12,000. That's what we will allow you to retain, and you'll give us back the rest of the money. So that's where we are. And
so it's in the hands of first selectmen to decide whether we can do that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's behooves us to have not an adversarial relationship with the Port Authority, because we want to keep applying for grants.
So if the first selectman were to ask us, this board, or this body, we would agree to refund it to the full amount, even though that would mean that we'd be eating $7,700. Okay.
But again, we were making a proposal all along and trying to document our case. But the final decision was up to them, and they made that decision.
All right. So that's where we stand.
I need to look at the accounts and see where the money's going to come from.
Okay. Any questions on the CHIP grant? We want to get that done so that there's, but that letter's in the first selectman's hands now, and
again, the work that went into just documenting all of those expenses and finding the purchase orders and being able to document everything that we did to the satisfaction of the Port Authority is thanks to Betty. I don't see how anybody else could ever have done that. Absent that, we couldn't make the argument that we give any money, retain anything. But
okay,
thank you.
I think we know where we stand. Thank you, Jeff. That brings us to the lower of the yard dinghy dock dredging, which I'm not sure there's any news on that. It's dependent on what
placeholder, yeah.
Yeah, it's a placeholder. Harbor management plan update. Ms. Taylor.
We have effectively reviewed the existing plan for the updates. We are currently working on a new chapter 7, which we will in which we hope to identify various projects that might occur in specific areas in the harbor, with the intent that this would, in effect, deep-proof the plan that's on. Because as you recall, the Cohen decision and DEEP have said that we don't have to pay any attention to Harbor Management Commission projects if they're not outlined in harbor management plans. So we're going to brainstorm and see if we can use our imaginations and creativity to come up with anything that might be possible to be possibly applied to be done in the future in several areas in the harbor management area. So that's kind of where we are. The approval process, or what would happen after we get done with the plan, with the harbor management plan update committee meetings, is that we'll send Jeff back to his office to rewrite and to incorporate the multitude of suggestions that have come from committee members. The plan would have to go to DEEP, RTM. We probably have to do, well, you guys first, then to DEEP for their approval. RTM has to have a public hearing. So while we're done doing our review, It could be a while before Jeff gets it written, get it to you guys, and then to the Steve and to the RTM. So we're making progress. You mentioned the Connecticut Port Authority. At the same time that they awarded the town and the commission a grant to dredge the Yacht Yard Harbor, they also awarded the commission a grant to rewrite and update the harbor management plan. Most of that money was spent in the prior committee work, on the prior committee work, which is why we're so substantially far along now. But I understand from Jeff that they want a report on how that money was used. So that's something that we'll be working on and submitting to them in the near future. So that's kind of where we are. We're done, but we've got a lot of work, a lot of other people to get involved once we.
Right.
Questions?
Sorry, it's a wild idea, but is there any thought to be given to extend our purview to include Pine Creek?
That's not us.
I know, it hasn't been us.
RTM.
Oh, that's RTM?
Yeah.
But could we ask somehow the RTM or to, change our charter, whatever we have to?
Code.
Yeah.
Code would have to be changed.
I mean, that's a long.
Why would we want to do that?
Why would we want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, plus, I think some thought needs to be given to, if we present to DEEP a radically changed harbor management plan.
True.
How will they react? Will they reject it, or in which case we're back to square one?
Yeah, we're open.
There's a little bit of strategy involved with
We
that.
already have a policy that in the plan now that says that the harbor, again, going back to 1995, the Harbor Management Commission should work cooperatively with other town commissions and departments in the feasibility of the Harbor Management Commission assuming harbor-related responsibilities currently under the jurisdiction of other town agencies. That's a little bit different. But then the next part of that is the current jurisdiction and responsibilities of the Harbor Management Commission could be expanded where it is shown that such expansion would result in more efficient and effective management of harbor resources. That leaves it sort of open-ended that it's something that can be looked at, but it's not saying that it should be done.
Right. Yeah, but it's saying there would be a reason to justify opening that up. And I'm sure there is. Sure.
Yeah, more headache.
Okay. Just a wild thought. Any further thoughts? Thank you, Kim. Anything else to ask for Kim? Kim? All right. Thank you, Kim. Yeah.
Other topics, new business. That's
Okay, we have one more.
And so I want to, I've got to get on the road here with traffic, but if someone else, I can keep the recording going from this until you're done and shut it off from here, since I started it from here. So someone else wants to call in. And how do I shut the recording off when I'm done? Is there a code, by the way? Do I just hang up? I don't know.
No,
Oh, yeah.
press *9 and then 1 again, and that'll.
Star 9 and 1. Okay, that's easy enough to remember. I write it down so I won't.
I did not recognize that as a valid entry.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, is there anything new on the Tide Mill Dam tide gates?
actually, yes. As we mentioned, we received express concern that the Tide Mill tide gates have deteriorated. One tide gate is missing, and the dam is in some sort of a disrepair. We have continued to discuss this with the DEP representative.
Welcome to My One Number. The recording has started.
Oh, that's you.
Use the magic. Get the magic touch.
It's reverberating.
Sounds like Psycho.
Yes.
And the DEP person acknowledged.
That was a great idea.
Acknowledged that the permit that was issued for restoration of the tide gates and the dam during the Exide project was issued to Exide, and Exide was identified as the responsible party for maintenance, which was probably not the right thing to do by DEEP because Exide is no longer around. But to DEEP's credit, and the person we talked with, he's trying to figure out how to enforce the maintenance of the tide gate and the dam. And he visited the site last Friday and called and said he was going to go into the tide mill and see if he could find an owner or someone representing the owner. Then he called back and said he had a very good discussion with someone on the ownership team who acknowledged that the tide gates needed to be fixed and that they were trying to figure out the process to do that, but that they were also interested in pursuing the installation of a fish ladder in the dam, which is something that had been discussed years ago. And now DEEP is supportive of such an initiative, but now they're looking to see if there are any funds available to be able to provide for a fish ladder through that dam. And then that gets us to the update of the harbor management plan again, whether the Harbor Commission would support that, which in the past had been discussed, but with the dam owner, but was years ago the dam owner wasn't supportive of that. So that's something in the works, and the owner has been contacted and is communicating with DEEP about how to fix the situation and perhaps install a tide gate, or not a tide gate, install a fish ladder.
Wow, that's interesting.
I'm sorry, that happened last Friday. I'm sorry I didn't call you.
No problem.
We talked about it at the committee meeting earlier.
Any questions about the tide gate at the tide mill? Okay, we're now into new business. I have one piece of new business, and that is, it may be a little bit odd and awkward to have Betty add in the minutes a note of recognition and appreciation in the minutes to Betty Gabriel for her time and effort and good penmanship for many years working with us. And you have your commission's great appreciation and gratitude for everything.
If we all stand to give you an ovation, would that be?
No, we're good.
We're good.
Thank you all very much.
She's so good, she'd written that in before you said it.
And Jeff, you have a couple other new business items.
A couple of other things. Mr. Herman from the Yacht Club will be the representative of the Yacht Club at the commission meeting. He could not come today because he had to pick up his daughter at the dentist or take his daughter to the dentist, but he will be at future meetings. Also, I talked with Mr. John Dilley, who was working on the town resilience plan. And so he would like to come to the commission meeting next month and just simply give a brief talk about what that...
Resilience?
Yes. That's what we were talking about. I think Don mentioned this at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So he would like to come because there is we talked about resiliency policies. It has to do with flood risk and sea level rise.
Right now.
Stuff like that. And we have a policy the draft policy that we've been working on. But he would. I'm going to talk with him some more before next month. But he would just like to come in and just basically give a brief presentation on what.
If you'd like to make a presentation, let me speak to him in advance of that.
Okay.
Ask him to give me a call.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
So that resiliency plan, Mr. Herman, and also the Corps of Engineers project manager in what's the month after May, June, would like to come visit the harbor again and just check out the mitigation planting area at the country club site to see how that's doing.
Right.
I think that's about all that and again, we're very pleased that Mr. Hurley was able to get through his emergency surgery and back working like he always does now.
Okay, any further new business for today? Any new applications? Any comment from the public? Hearing none, we stand adjourned at 5:45. Thank you.